Joining us now, the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Karen Bass of California. She is one of the House co-sponsors of the Justice in Policing Act of 2020, which is scheduled for committee markup this morning. Congresswoman Bass is also a member of both the Foreign Affairs and Judiciary Committees. Good to have you on board. We were just talking about this, and I noted that that you had mentioned that the slogan, defund the police, was not potentially the best slogan ever, but then you apologized. I mean, even Jim Clyburn, has stated how he feels about this. So explain your apology, if you could, and where we really should be going with this effort.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I'll tell you, I never want to discourage activism, especially as somebody who spent the first part of my life as an activist. But you know what? 30 years ago, I started an organization when we saw divestment in our communities beginning, and I was so worried that we were beginning to criminalize public health issues, social issues, and economic issues. 30 years ago, it was the height of the crack cocaine epidemic. And I think that over the years, that's what we have done. We've shredded the safety net, we've divested from cities, and it's put more and more responsibility on police. So let me give you an example from my city. We have a jail called the Twin Towers. It has hundreds of inmates. We call it the most expensive mental health institution in our country. You hear police officers complain all the time that they should not have to pick up the pieces from society. And so part of what we're doing in the bill that I'm very excited about is that we are providing grants to communities so they can begin to look at these issues, look at how city budgets are organized, look at the resources and put them in ways that it helps the police, because again, the police are not trained social workers. They don't want to do that work. And I think we need to look at that. So I'm excited that I think the bill is bold. I think it's transformative. And I think that it helps police officers and communities at the same time. Holding police accountable, making it transparent, and helping communities at the same time.
Congresswoman Bass, Willie Geist, good to have you on with us this morning. You've taken a leadership role here on this question of police reform on the House side, putting together this proposal, this bill. Republicans in the Senate have shown some willingness to do something on this. Obviously, they're not going as far as you would like them to go. We saw the president's executive order yesterday. There does seem to be some recognition, at least, of this moment. Perhaps it's not far enough for many people, but do you see what you've proposed here making it through a Republican-led Senate and being signed by the President of the United States?
Well, I am extremely hopeful, and I'll tell you why. Because I think my Republican colleagues, as well as the president, are mimicking our legislation. They have included a number of the same categories, but in my opinion, they've taken the teeth out of it. And I think that this moment in our country is so critical. We have protests, that have been in 50 states and in many countries around the world. The last thing in the world we need to do is to do something that is symbolic, that has no teeth. For example, when the president did his ban chokeholds, he basically said that you shouldn't use a chokehold unless your life is in danger. Well, why the heck would you use a chokehold to begin with? And so that's already policy that exists. The point of our bill is to ban chokeholds, is to ban no-knock warrants, is to ban or to put in place a national registry so that you don't have a Tamir Rice, 12-year-old child, lost his life 6 years ago by a police officer that had been fired by another agency, and all he did is move to another jurisdiction. And in my conversations with the Fraternal Order of Police and other police unions and police chiefs, this is a common practice. When the rare case when an officer is fired, there's nothing that prohibits them from going to another jurisdiction. So I think what we are proposing in the bill is much stronger. This is not a moment to do something that touches along the surfaces, but really doesn't get at the core issues.
Congresswoman, you've talked in the past about watching the civil rights movement of the 1960s as a young girl with your father, and then getting into community activism and politics because of your experiences with that. What do you see broadly in the streets right now as compared to the civil rights movement of the 1960s? How is it different, and what are we witnessing exactly?
Well, you know, in a way, what happened in the civil rights movement, as you remember, it was because the media went down there and exposed the brutality of the South. And today, it was the cell phone camera that really was the catalyst. Now, we've seen a number of killings and shootings and beatings with cell phone cameras, but this time we sat and the world sat and watched a man killed slowly over 8 minutes. What I see out in the streets in some cases, few black folks, predominantly white folks, wearing Black Lives Matters t-shirts. This moment has created a conversation in our country about systemic racism. And one of the things that has always been so painful and troubling to me is people who have not experienced the relationship with police that African Americans and Latinos and other people have experienced will say, well, that's never happened to me. And so they completely negated the experience of other people. And now for the first time, I'm hearing people say, well, that hasn't been my experience with police, but I do know that other communities interact with police differently. And beginning to accept that and have that conversation, to me, I'm thrilled by it. And I hope that the protests, peaceful of course, I hope they continue because those protests are going to help us get this over the finish line.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.